listening to the Wartime Leadership Podcast. This week, David Wilcox joins us. And now, your host, Nathan Coy.
You know, it doesn't get old hearing your introduction. The music that you wrote, G, just always just pumps me up and gets me wanting to dance. But then I remember that we're now video, so it makes me quietly come back to my center place.
Thank you, sir.
Today's guest, David Wilcox. Listen, folks, I grew up watching the 700 Club. I had parents, grandparents, the entire family watched the 700 Club, CBN, Christian Broadcasting Network. Pat Robertson. David was the personal security. He was the body man. He was the I'll take a bullet for you guy for Mr. Pat Robertson, somebody that I grew up watching, admiring, going through the generations. And so today's conversation is going to go places, and I'm excited about it. David, sir, thank you for joining us.
Nathan, it's really my great honor and pleasure to be here. Excuse me.
You know, the little bits that I've read about your story, I say the little bits. Listen, you have done a lot of different things, from Oceanside PD to working directly with the Disney family, the Walt Disney family, to going to a place that I'm currently going to college for my master's degree at Regent University. Just so much has happened in your life, and I'm looking forward to get into it. But before we do, we always ask some random questions just to kind of warm up. And the random question generator brought up, when you were a kid, what did you hope to do when you grew up?
That's presuming that I grew up. But anyway, the truth is, as you mentioned, I worked for the Disney family at Disneyland when I was in college. I was a conductor on the steam trains, and a few people know that Walt personally owned the steam trains, the monorails, and the parking lots, and a few retail things. So we considered ourselves the Disneyland elite. We worked for Disney, for Walt. It was after he had passed away that I worked there. But I always wanted to be an Imagineer. I was always interested in animation. In fact, that's what my master's degree at Regent specialized was in filmmaking and animation. But I wanted to go to work for Imagineering, and I actually got an interview with them, and I was offered a job. However, the problem was couplefold. They paid horribly for entry-level people. I couldn't afford. I would have had to have commuted from Oceanside to Glendale every day.
Oof.
Tough drive. And back in those days, Disney wasn't worldwide. They had Disney World and Disneyland. They weren't global. So what their track record was when they were going to build a new feature ride, they'd hire all these people in, get it, everybody's doing everything, and then the minute the ride was over, it's like layoff time. And I didn't want to live like that. So
Of course not.
I turned the job down, and I ended up coming to Regent to get my master's degree, and that's where the progress took place.
And you actually ended up using your animation degree later on with CBN, because you actually became the head of animation for Christian Broadcasting.
Well, when I took a brief hiatus from security, I wrote a proposal to CBN. I said, look, you guys have got everything you need to create an animation studio except the studio. You've got audio production, you've got video production, you've got marketing, all this stuff. You just don't have the people to do the grunt work. That's where I come in. I said, give me $300,000 and I'll build a studio in the premises. We'll use all the other facilities and we'll produce all this animation for you. And I don't know if it was a lack of wisdom on their part, but they took the deal. And they said, come back now and get started. So we built I've always been fortunate to work with absolute geniuses. And it's just something, maybe it's a magnetic pull. I don't know. But
that's actually how G feels when he's working with me, that he's working with genius. So,
well,
I was going to say, I don't know how that feels.
But I had this core group of friends that had gone to Regent, and in fact, one of them just recently passed away a while ago. But I said, hey, I got this money to start this studio. do you want to give it a whirl? And, yeah. So it was great. We ended up producing some stuff for CBN, for the Family Channel back in the day. And then the most incredible thing happened. They brought me in and they said, we're going to produce a 1 hour animated Christmas special. It's going to be called Micah's Christmas Treasure. And we want you to go over to Shanghai, China and work with a Chinese studio over there. This is a landmark thing because
Wow.
Yeah.
communist China doesn't like the gospel at that
Yeah.
particular time. So I am in communist China working with these Chinese animators. I didn't speak Chinese. I had a translator. I had to mime a lot of stuff, what I wanted to do. Anyway, for pennies on the dollar, we were able to turn out a 1 hour animated Christmas special. Then we followed it up with an Easter special. And
Wow.
from what I've been told, this thing had the ability to spread the gospel to 1/5 of the nation.
Wow.
Now,
And
It's not Disney quality animation, mind you, but it gets the story across. And so that's kind of the genesis of the animation.
well, question number 2. What is one thing you cannot live without?
My redheaded mermaid, my wife, Tresta. She is the smartest, most brilliant, beautiful, talented, gifted woman I've ever met in my life. I would rather sit and just hold her hand than go out and
Hmm.
play any dragons or conquer anything. And
All
she
right.
is
So here's the question
incredible.
today. Is she in the room with you?
No, she better not be.
Okay. So you're actually saying the truth. So that's even better.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm madly in love with her. She is just an amazing woman.
That's awesome. All right. Final question. What's your favorite guilty pleasure food wise?
I'd really like a good hamburger.
Same.
I mean, just with all the fixings and just a good quality beef. You go to McDonald's nowadays, you pay $7, $8 for a beef patty that you can read a newspaper through, and it's about the size of a poker chip. It's crazy. You go to a nice little restaurant, put the good burger out, man, I'm a happy camper.
Somebody thought it was a great idea to come up with a craze lately for smash burgers. So they're just everywhere.
Yeah, we've got 3 or 4, right in the immediate area here, and,
Yeah. David's actually come to us from Virginia. So I don't know how much I trust barbecue coming out of Virginia, but
well,
we'll let it slide.
the good news is I'm about 20 minutes from the North Carolina border, so I can sneak over there when I
All
want.
right.
Yeah, so it's a
Well, I'm in
win-win.
the better Carolina. You just got to keep going a little further south. So,
I understand.
David, absolutely amazing. Great introductory questions. I think we already kind of started to hit on a few points, but why don't you take us through your background? I mean, police officer, Oceanside, your college, and really kind of how you came into CBN and to really meeting Pat Robertson.
I had been Oceanside was my hometown, born and raised there, attended high school, and I was a pretty good swimmer and water polo player. And as a result, I was able to get a beach lifeguard job every summer for the Oceanside Lifeguard Service. Eventually worked my way up to the lieutenant, second in command. And it was a great summer job. We got our job back automatically every year. We just had to tell them we wanted it back, do a qualifying swim, and they hired you for the summer. We didn't have to go put in applications everywhere. And it paid about 3.5 times the minimum wage at that time. I mean, it was good
Yeah.
pay. A lot of responsibility, and it meant you were going to be spending your entire summer vacation sitting in a little lifeguard tower, but it was well compensated. Well, I got done my senior year of college, uh, and I know what I was going to do. And I met a friend of mine, and he says, "Hey, man," he says, "Oceanside PD's got a test going on next week for a police officer. Why don't you come in?" And so I said, "Yeah, I'll give it a whirl." God's always kind of provided these little opportunities for me. And I called the city. They said, "Well, bad news is we've already handed out all the slots for the test." Now, the good news is you can show up, and if somebody fails to show, we can give you their test, and you can take it. So I did, stood around, watched all these guys go in. And finally, they signaled and told me to come in. They gave me the test. Long story short, I came in second out of about 300 people.
Nice.
Got uh, offered a job, and that by December of that year, I was sworn in as a police officer. Loved the job. Just worked with a great bunch of guys. I eventually got injured. I had a serious knee injury. They had to kind of rebuild my right knee, and they told me it's marginal if you be safe on the street. Didn't want to work at desk, so I retired. Met a young girl in Oceanside, not the redheaded mermaid, and got suckered into marrying her. There's no animus, can you tell? And she had always wanted to come back to Virginia and work for the 700 Club. And she said, "Could we do that?" We were newly married. I was high on codeine, I think, for the knee injury. But anyway, I said, "Sure, let's go." We packed up a U-Haul truck, traveled across country, and in 78, early mid 80s, we showed up at student housing and we were enrolled in the grads program. We were both studying communication, and I went over to um, student services because I was newlywed. I wanted to take care of my wife and do what was right and wanted to get a job. His grad school wasn't kind of full time. It was like in the evening, 4-hour classes and stuff. And so I turned in an application to a wonderful lady, never forget her name's Nancy Keith. And she said, "Oh my goodness, you've got police background." She goes, "Do you know who Pat Robertson is?" I said, "Sure, I know him. I see him on TV all the time, 700 Club." And she whispered, she goes, "He's thinking of running for president and he needs bodyguards." And I said, "Great." I said, "I got 2 questions. What does it pay and when do I start?" And she said, "Let me get you an appointment with Jim Small. He heads up the security department." Went over and met with Jim Small. Jim Small to this day is my best friend in the world. We interviewed, we hit it off. He says, "I got to tell you, you're the most qualified candidate I've ever interviewed in this job. The bad news is there's no openings right now. There's a hiring freeze. And it happens at ministries. When the money takes a little dip, they freeze all hiring." He said, "I will call you the moment that freeze lifts and you can come over and start work." So I was on pins and needles for like 2, 3 weeks and no call. Friday, I wouldn't have had a call. I'd go into a deep depression because it wasn't going to happen over the weekend. Eventually got the call, came over, uh, got all my badge and gun and all that stuff issued to me. And within about a week or two, I was traveling around with Pat Robertson. It was a very uh, weird existence because I would go to grad school classes Monday through Friday, and then typically Friday afternoon, Pat and I would get on a plane and we'd go out and fly and do a bunch of free campaign meetings. It was legal to do. He had started this group called Americans for Robertson. It was his PAC. He had not officially, said he was running, so he wasn't under Secret Service protection. And it was wild. We'd go out and we'd do 10 to 12 events a day, craziness. And Sunday afternoon, we'd fly back into Virginia Beach. I'd take off my gun, go back to grad school, and, that's what was going on. So um, it was one of these God things. He just kind of opened the door for me. It was perfectly suited for me. I had all this police background. I'm 6'5", about
Oh, wow.
260. Pat was
Wow.
only 6'3", so he liked me because if the shooting started, he could duck behind me very quickly. So it was a great job.
Wow. So, I mean, so you're coming into this just as he's getting into the president or into the conversation for
Right,
a possible presidential run.
right.
How close were you with him?
Pat is a dichotomy. People think they know him from the 700 Club. They think he's this kind, elderly statesman, really loves the Lord, loves people, wants to do good to everybody. And there was that's a fringe of what he was like. When he was off the TV set, he was he could be really hellish to work for.
Mm,
Uh, I I've told people before, they said, "Well, did Pat Robertson have any friends?" I said, "I, in all my time with him, never heard him mention a particular single friend that he could call if he was in a family crisis or go have a drink with or, whatever." He knew a heck of a lot of people. They were just business acquaintances, cogs in his wheel of companies and stuff. So, I think he enjoyed me because I always teased him a lot, or I was always cracking little jokes with him, and he would kinda chuckle and say, but there were times when he would just deadly serious. If he was out on the road, if you screwed up more than once or twice, he'd find somebody else. He
wow.
wanted I always told people, I said, "Pat Robertson wants things done 3 ways: good, fast, and cheap.
Mm,
And if you could cook all those boxes off, he's a happy camper." He would very, very rarely you do 12 events in a day and put him in his room at night, and if you heard the words, "Well, that went well," that was an A plus. That was a pat on the head. That was A number 1 thumbs up. That was about as complimentary as you would ever get. And I would tell people coming into the fold, "Do not expect this guy to flip cartwheels for you
hmm,
and lavish you with praise. It won't happen. You'll come away just fatigued and go, 'What the hell? I just stood up
hmm.
and protected this guy for 16 hours, and that's what I get?'" So, anyway, I don't know if that answers your question, but, um, there was a great duplicity in the personality types that people saw versus the reality.
Well, duplicity is fine, right? Like, you have the multiple personalities. As you get tired, you start to change kind of the way that you react to people. We see this with our son all the time, and myself working with my son. So it's not a far-fetched idea to think that he would be getting tired, maybe, and that
Oh, yeah.
he wasn't as grateful as he should be.
Yeah, I'm not accusatory, I'm not saying it's necessarily a
Hmm.
bad thing. It's just it was a big spectrum. You went from A to Z. There was no L and M and O
Mm,
in his makeup. Uh, and I mean, every once in a while, I'd drop the ball on something, something wasn't where it was supposed to be when I told him it was going to be there or whatever. And he'd look at me and go, "Well, what am I paying you for?"
I,
I
I
guess
I look at a lot of people and I say the same thing. What are you paying me for? So
it's
there
like to be good looking and keep you alive is what I am.
to step in front of the bullet,
Yeah.
honestly.
But yeah, it was no nonsense. Um, he would quickly fire people,
Hmm.
which I didn't like about him. He was very unforgiving in a business setting. He was in the studio one day recording a promo piece for the Regent University. He was supposed to write something on a whiteboard and take a little walk, and write another thing, and then turn to the camera and do his spiel. And he screwed it up about 12 times in a row. They had to reset everything. He was getting frustrated. Finally, he stepped off the platform, went to a house phone, called the university, found out who the person was that had written this promo, and said, "I want them gone today." I'm like,
You almost
"Well,
say the audacity of someone.
Unfortunately, that is oh too common with a lot of personalities, especially, televised or live people. They have to
yeah,
focus so strongly into what they're presenting,
yeah.
and then that's exhausting
Well,
too.
more than often, and I don't have a particular episode of the 700 Club to give to you for research, but more than often, when they'd go to a commercial and there was something going on he didn't like, he would, pardon my language, he would chew somebody's ass on the
Wow.
production floor. He'd call him over and he'd be talking to him. Well, he forgot that his mic was on,
Oh yeah.
wireless
Oh.
mic, and he was hammering him. And the stage producer would be getting his attention, 3, 2, 1, we're coming back live. And quite often he'd still be chewing. And then all of a sudden he'd realize and go, "Whoa." welcome back to the 700 Club, ladies and gentlemen. And it was just, oh God, everybody was standing around chuckling because he got caught. But yeah, he was tough. He was a tough cookie.
Wow. So being that he, there, it, I unfortunately see ministry sometimes as having to be business driven because it is still a deal where you have to make money, but at the same time you're just trying to pay the bills. Was there a moment when you saw that it kind of switched for him, or was it
Oh,
always kind of just the same?
oh, absolutely. And I'll tell you what happened. And this is in the book. It's impactful. In fact, the book is a transitional book. It starts off. It got started with advice from one of my advisors in grad school. Wonderful man, Terry Linval. Terry and I look like the odd couple. Terry, I think, is about 5'6", but he's smart as hell. Anyway, I'd go to Terry's office some days when I was taking a break and regale him with some anecdotal story that just happened. He goes, "You got to write these in a book. It'd be fun. Just write all these pet stories in a book. It'd be great." So anyway, I thought about. Well, I started doing that, and finally, I got to a point where it was a transitional phase, and I can tell you the exact moment. We were in the company car. He always rode around a dark blue Lincoln Town Car. He hated limousines, would not get in a limousine, and hated a lot of other brands of cars. It was always a blue Lincoln Town Car. I was in the shotgun seat. One of my security officers was driving, and in the back was Pat in the middle of the seat. And on one side was Rob Hartley, who was the director of development for CBN, the money man. And on his other side was a man who I think he's probably still alive, but I'll tell you, I thought he was despicable. A guy named Mark Nuttall. And he was the campaign manager for Pat, for Americans for Robertson. I don't know, you're probably pretty too young to remember the old B movies, where the hero was in a dilemma and he'd have a little angel and a little devil appear on his shoulders and they'd be whispering their
Yeah.
cases to him back and forth, back and forth. That's exactly what it was. Mark Nuttall's in the car and he said, "Pat, you got to give us your campaign access to the CBN donor base. 3.5 million names were on that donor base. And it was the feeder source for all the money coming into CBN. And he said, "We need the money. We're going broke. Americans for Robertson is in debt. We don't have money to continue the campaign. If you want to be president, you got to give us access to that donor base. Switch over to the angel,
Mm,
Rob Hartley. Pat, you can't do that. That's illegal.
Mhm.
It violates federal law. You'll lose your tax exempt status for the ministry. People will start getting propaganda and donation cards from Americans for Robertson. They'll get confused. Some people will hate the fact that
mm,
you're mixing church and state. Some people will say, "Well, I only got $20 to give to Pat, and I've been given to the 700 Club, but he wants to be president. I want him to be president, so I'll take the money from the ministry this month and give it over to the Americans for Robertson." And Hartley told him, he said, "If you do, you're going to ruin the ministry." And
Mhm.
it went back and forth, back and forth, back
mm,
and forth. And I was sitting in the seat thinking, we are at a crossroads and a half. And came a moment of silence. It seemed like an eternity. And I heard Pat utter these words, "Give them the list." And
mm,
we were done. And it was like a gut punch. Fast forward, Pat Robertson left the ministry to go on a campaign trail full time. Donations to CBN fell off somewhere around 42 to 44%, just like Hartley predicted. And when Pat Robertson returned to his beloved CBN ministry, 600 plus people had lost their jobs as a amount
wow.
as
Wow.
a cause from layoffs and the money drop. And it was it was a horrible time. My boss at the time, Jim Small, he had the horrible duty. Pat would walk around with a legal pad. He'd stop employees on the hallway. "What's your name? What do you do here for CBN? And who's your direct report, vice president?" And he'd write a little note and go to the next, go to the next. And it got to the point where I used to tease. It said the vice president thought the angel of death was coming down the hallway They were putting blood over their office threshold to keep the angel of Pat from going in there because it meant laying off people. He'd take that list, have it typed up, give it to Jim Small, and he had the horrible duty of going around to these vice presidents and saying, Pat wants these people gone today. And it was bloody. It was bloody. And
Wow.
he that's what got him into trouble later on. And that's covered. That's where the division takes place in the book, because I go through all these get get rich quick schemes that
Mhm.
would carry on after Pat had died, in theory. But God, I think this is my assessment. God pulled His blessing off of Pat. I told him several times. I said, Pat, you didn't get where you are in politics. And the old saying is, you danced with the one that brought you to the dance. It wasn't politics; it was ministry. You sever yourself from ministry and go in some other path, I think God's gonna pull His blessing off you. Well, He sure as hell did, and he lost millions and millions and millions of dollars pursuing interests that were, in the public sector, multi-level marketing. He tried to capture all the oil, set up an oil refinery in Long Beach, or, uh, Santa Fe Springs, California. Uh he tried to take control of the internet in China. He started trying to start the Yahoo of China.
Oh,
He
wow.
was he was interested in setting up a theme park, religious oriented Bible theme park in Jerusalem. But
Wow.
they all imploded. They all imploded.
This sounds like episode of, Righteous Gemstones. I guess that's where they got the source material.
And if you want specifics, I can give you specifics on all those attempts. It was bloody. And he just was in a panic. He came back and thought, "My God, if this happened when I took 6 months off to run for president, what's gonna happen when I'm in pearly gates and I'm not here? I don't have a successor.
Yeah.
I don't have somebody can step in and carry the mantle for me," you know, and that's what happened. He panicked and he said, "I gotta get some entity going that's gonna outlive CBN and outlive
And
me."
that makes sense. You want to be able to see,
Sure.
that the legacy that you're leaving is not tainted in any way or whatsoever. But and I know we could go on and on about, the bad things that we see happening or the trends that kind of go, but there had to have been something good that drew you in, because I take it that you identify as a Christian.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So in doing that, what kind of good did you see? Because I mean, a lot of people don't see the behind the scenes, behind the curtain.
Well, let me tell you the dichotomy that I saw. When I came to CBN, CBN was doing some incredible things. They had a group called Operation Blessing. It's still in
Hmm.
function today. Bunch of semi trucks, and they had a warehouse full of food goods. And if there was a hurricane disaster down the south, Operation Blessing was typically the first NGO on the scene. They were there typically weeks before FEMA ever thought about getting trucks down there. They were down there, they had mobile kitchens, they were handing out free hot meals to people that were destitute. They were handing out water, clothing, whatever. It was wonderful. I was giving I was a member of the 2,500 club. I believed in him so much, but
Hmm.
I wasn't making a fortune. I was making maybe about 30% of what I would have made in the real world. But I believed in him. I was given $2,500 a year to the 2,500 Club to support CBN's ventures. Um, so Pat had a heart for people. He wanted to do good things for people. He wanted to help them when they were in time of crisis. And I'll tell you something that probably few people know. We had a beautiful, spirited floor producer. Her name was Sandy, and her husband died in a rock climbing accident. And she was crushed. She had children. She was not getting paid a lot. She worked for the ministry. And Pat appreciated so much what she did for him and keeping him coordinated on the live broadcast. He bought her a house.
Wow.
He bought her a house, put her up in the house, paid off the mortgage, and he did it with practically, I mean, no real fanfare. I mean, people that were right there in the inner circle knew about it. And he did a lot of things like that. But he got blinded by, I think, the power that came with thinking he was going to be president. And a lot of people were fearful of that. They thought, oh my God, Pat Robertson is going to get in the White House and mandate that everyone become a Christian in the United States.
Well, and and I think what you're talking about is kind of with around Matthew 6:3, right? Don't let your in paraphrasing, don't let your left hand see what your right hand is doing.
Right.
And and you want to be able to have the humility to be able to do those types of things for someone where you don't have to receive any praise and whatnot, and you got to see the good side, be able to do that for
Oh yeah.
people.
Yeah. I watched him, I was with him one day. A man came from South America. He was trying to raise money to set up a high-powered antenna to spread the gospel via his little radio station. Like a one-man, two-man operation, and
Hmm.
he really had a heart for people. And Pat listened to him for about 2, 3 minutes. Turned to his administrative assistant, Barbara Johnson, who was just a saint. He said, "Barbara, just go up and cut him a check for $10,000." Guy's problem was solved. He just opened this guy up to spreading the gospel via radio through, I can't tell you exactly what country it was, but somewhere in South America. And I mean, he didn't have to do that. Pat got approached by people all the time wanting things, but he had a pretty good gift of discernment where the person's heart was, and he did quite a bit of benevolent giving to people. The problem came when he decided to go into politics, because politics, I don't care who's in it, is dirty,
Yep.
it's double-minded, it's self-serving. I mean, we got people in the Congress right now that are supposed to be representing our interests that make about $180,000 salary that are multi millionaires
Yeah.
because they're getting insider
Yeah.
trading and they're trading on the stock market. And oh, I'm an advocate for you. I'm going to take your needs before Congress. They're backing up to the residual window, and they're scamming the American public. And I think that's what happened with Pat. I don't think he went into politics to be a scammer. I think he wanted to make some changes in a lot of social programs, but it polluted him. It tainted him.
Yeah. And I think it's hard to say, what that turning point was, but I think that conversation inside of the car that you overheard was probably that psychological slope coming to a point of
Yeah,
acceleration
yeah.
with other people influencing him. Is that a safe assessment?
Oh, well, you're very insightful. I take back all the cruel things I said about you. You're very intelligent. No, that's exactly when it happened. Okay. That was when the door opened. He was at the fork in the road. He could have gone continued with the ministry. He could have said, Mark, you know what? I don't think God's in this. I don't want to compromise the ministry I've set up over the last 30 years. It's been a good ride, but I'm going to just shut down my campaign and do what God called. He didn't do that. He went off the rails to politics, put the ministry
Yeah.
on the back burner. He took the life force out of it. He was off TV eventually, and because of equal time requirements for other candidates, and uh, it imploded. And he wasn't there. There was a study done when I was researching the book that said personality ministries rarely succeed after the personality is gone.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Very rarely, and that's exactly what happened. Pat got off the 700 Club. It was his electronic pulpit in the millions and millions of homes. Yours was, mine was, and then all of a sudden, he's gone.
Yeah.
And God bless the people that filled in for him. His son, Tim, brilliant guy, but he doesn't have the charisma that Pat Robertson had.
You're right.
Gordon, his other son, Gordon's a nice guy, but both of them had the personality of a phone dial tone, and they just didn't have it, and they couldn't connect with the audience, and it imploded. And that's what caused his panic. That's what caused him to go astray and all these wild business ventures that all collapsed.
Well, and the Bible does say, that there's this element of for all have sinned, right? For all have
Oh,
sinned
yeah.
and come short of the glory of God. And that is a deal. And it's unfortunate when you see somebody at such an elevated, that a lot of people in life have elevated to this position of, you know, anything you do. I mean, in today's society with social media, if this had happened back then
Oh,
with
it'd been
social
over.
media, it probably would have ended a lot sooner than it ever was, and probably would
Yeah.
have grown a lot quicker. I think that's where social media has pros and cons with it, right? There's definitely the pro side of, you identify a problem, you elevate it. We see this in the military. Jeff and I both served in the Air Force together, actually, and that's one thing that we see with social media is it's taking problems that maybe wouldn't come to light as quickly,
Yeah.
become bigger and more expansive. Maybe back then this would have helped guide how he was going, and it's unfortunate because I sin every single day, and I'm sure you and G, we all sin every
Right.
single day. We or it's unfortunate to we elevate ourselves and our sin less than to somebody who's like a Pat Robertson. And I think there was a lot of good done by Pat, even
Oh, yeah.
that God can use even the I mean, the demons were fallen angels, even, so at one time they were heavenly beings. And I think that we kind of elevate our sin less than somebody else's because it's somebody like that.
Well, Nathan, let me be crystal clear. This is not a hatchet piece book.
Hmm.
The goal of this was not to undermine or belittle or, blemish Pat Robertson. I love Pat Robertson. I would have taken a bullet for him in a heartbeat. He and both him and his wife, Dee Dee, which is a sweet woman. The goal of the book was to tell some of the personality stories that were driven by Pat on the road during his campaign and at CBN. There was always something crazy going on there. But then politics came in, and that's when the transition came. That's when the loss of focus to the ministry came. I just want to chronicle that. I don't tell anything untrue about him. I am inherently honest. It's not a hatchet piece. Most of my critics, when this thing came out, they called me Judas. They said, "Enjoy your blood money," blah blah blah. And I told them, I said, "You obviously hadn't read the book."
Hmm.
I said, "There's nothing in there that's, betrayal. It's all true, could be corroborated by multiple people, and I just want people to know what life is like." And, uh, you know, it's an interesting read because I know people will come to it, and it's even discussed in the book. This is the transition point, politics. This is the
Hmm.
good, this is the light side, this is the dark side. I loved working for Pat. I mean, he was a rock star of his era in
Yeah.
televangelist. I mean, we go out to these we did a thing, in Anaheim. It was the Women's Aglow Fellowship Convention, and they had 10,000, attendees, and when he walked into that building and I got him up on the stage, you would have thought Michael Jackson was there with a bunch of teeny boppers. I mean, it was a standing ovation. It hurt. It hurt my ears so badly. I was like, "Oh
Right.
my god, if they rush the stage, I'm a dead man." 'Cause, they were just wildly in love with Pat Robertson, and that's something that people weren't aware of, but it happened all over the country. You go on these campaign, uh, presentations, people loved him. It was
Yeah.
crazy. That's why the ministry worked. But when he
Yeah.
left, it was like they took the heart out of it. It just died on the vine.
Yeah, when you plug or when you rip off the or rip out the air, and it
Yeah,
starts to deflate like a balloon,
yeah,
it's not the same shape as it once was. I think some people will look at these books and they'll think it's either a narrative or a true crime series.
yeah.
And I think that's a hard, those are two different sides of a coin. I personally haven't read them yet because I told you before we started this that I wanted to be able to have the same reaction and ask the questions as our listeners are listening to it. But I will say I am looking forward to it. The first book is Protecting Pat Robertson, Confessions of a High-Priced Bagman. And of course, that goes into the behind the scenes of the ministry transitioning between the the ministry to the political movement, I guess would be a fair assessment. The second book, which is one that I'm not so familiar with this individual, The Trial of the Devil Incarnate, Ralph Reed, God's Film Flam Man.
Flim Flam Man, yeah. Um, Ralph is an interesting character. He's still doing what he's doing, and he's still doing what I mentioned in the book. Uh, the Huffington Post labeled him as one of the most duplicitous people, one of the most monumental hypocrites of our time. That
Ooh,
takes some
wow.
in our
Yeah, that's
society.
something.
That's the pinnacle. And he
Well
was the
done.
choi- he was Pat's. You get an A, Ralph. Uh, Pat set up a group in conjunction, kind of in support of the Republican Party. They did a couple of illegal things. It's called the Christian Coalition,
I
and
remember that.
he
Yeah.
chose Ralph Reed, excuse me, to head this up. Ralph was this neophyte politics addict, and he just lived and breathed politics. He put Ralph Reed in charge of the Christian Coalition. Ralph ran it into the ground. It was one of the probably the most strongest political groups in the country at the time. Uh, and the book that book, and I could go on and on, I won't give you all the details, but it chronologues Ralph Reed's duplicity, his illegalities that he's done, felonies. Ralph Reed should have gone to prison.
Hmm.
He should have been trotted out in a blaze orange jumpsuit with shackles on him. He went into private sector lobbying after he left the Christian Coalition, and was an abysmal failure at it. So he called a buddy of his that he had known back in his college days, a guy named Jack Abramoff.
Hmm.
He was an Uber lobbyist in Washington.
Yeah.
Pretty shady dude. Long story short, Reed, Abramoff, and Abramoff's partner Michael Scanlon formed what I call the unholy trinity. They built a handful of American Indian tribes that were running casinos down in the South out of about, I believe, I'm maybe quoting the wrong figure, but it was at least $70 million is what they built these tribes out of, representing them under false pretenses. They set them up, and then they'd come in and say, "We can fix your problem," blah, blah,
Ah.
blah. There was a trial, I'm sorry, a Senate hearing led by John McCain. He subpoenaed Abramoff, he subpoenaed Scanlon, he subpoenaed about 12 other underlings of these guys. And guess who didn't get a subpoena? Guess who didn't show up? Didn't have to testify.
Mr. Reed.
Ralph Reed. Why? Because he had friends in high places. He had George Herbert Walker Bush, who his
Hmm.
American Coalition or Christian Coalition helped raise over $1 million in support and propaganda through voter guides. He did that illegally for them. And then he helped Karl Rove and George W. Bush get voter lists in Michigan under the guise of working for Enron. He was being paid
Wow.
by Enron, supposedly getting signatures for voters. I'm sorry, supposedly working for Enron to get lobbying on behalf of Enron's electricity partners, which they had zero in Michigan. He was getting voters registered for George W. Bush. It's all in the book. I've got canceled checks that were laundered. He would Ralph Reed set up bogus companies. He would launder his paychecks because it wouldn't look really cool for the former head
Wow.
of the Christian Coalition to be getting paid by gambling entities.
Oh,
In
of
fact,
Yeah.
course not.
he raised millions doing the other position. He at the Christian Coalition, he told people, gambling is a cancer. It's destroying American families. It's It's taking the bread out of the mouths of babes. It's robbing families, and gambling is evil. We're fighting the evil gambling at the Christian Coalition. Send us money so we can continue fighting gambling. Fast forward a few years, he's getting secretly paid millions of dollars to keep gambling casinos alive in Louisiana and Texas. Okay, he never had to appear. He never had to appear in a hearing. He never said word one. So what I did is I created a bogus second hearing where Ralph Reed did get subpoenaed. He was under oath. He had to answer all the questions that Abramoff and Scanlon did, and it's backed up by emails. It's backed up by canceled checks. It's backed up by statements from witnesses. And it's an ironclad case against Ralph Reed. He should have gone to prison. Abramoff went to prison. Scanlon went to prison. All the underlings went to prison. But the third part of the evil trinity didn't even have to come and testify. And he should have gone to prison. And Ralph Reed's still doing the same thing in Georgia right now for another group, which is just another version of the Christian Coalition. It's the Faith and Family or Faith and Freedom Coalition. Can't remember that. I haven't looked it up in a while.
Yeah, a lot of these guys do stuff like that. They keep doing it over and over again. When they find that one thing that clicks that they can really get over on people, you know,
you can tell I'm passionate about it.
Yeah, if it's not broken, type deal.
Yeah, and
it's just
I'm
another
passionate
con.
about it. Yeah, he's duplicitous. He'll stand up there in his nice looking suit and talk the talk, but he never walks the walk. And he ran the Christian Coalition into the ground. They were $2 million, or they were millions of dollars in debt 2 years after he left. They had to pay back taxes because they violated the IRS codes.
Mm-hmm.
It's all in the book, and I've got everything well documented in there. I've got copies of his canceled checks. I think it needs to go viral and tell people what Ralph Reed's doing today. It's the same thing. But anyway,
it looks like faith. How did Ralph Reed come into with Pat Robertson? Like, how did you kind of overhear a lot of this?
This is a great question. Pat Robertson's Achilles heel. Are you ready for it? He had no discernment when it came to people he put in his organization.
Oh,
None.
wow.
None. I used to joke with him, and maybe this would have got me fired, but I had a gun and he knew it. I used to tell him, I said, Pat, if Charles Manson drove up in front of CBN, got out of a Mercedes, wearing $1,000 suit and sporting a Rolex watch, you'd make him a vice president.
He was quite charismatic.
Yeah. And he said, I'm not that bad, am I? I said, you're worse. I said, you have no discernment when it comes to people. Let me tell you a quick story. You got time for one little quick anecdote that supports this? We were eating lunch in Dallas at the Lowe's Anatole Hotel. We were staying there. He was eating a half a cantaloupe. I'll remember this till the day I die. And he leans over and says, I've got 4 or 5 people I'm bringing on board. They're all at the top of their multi-level marketing pyramids with their companies. They're going to give all that up and come to work for CBN for our multi-level marketing thing. It's called Benefits Plus. We're going to sell these little discount cards. We're going to make a fortune off this. I said, Pat, I'm just a dumb security guard, but let me ask you a question. Isn't the idea of a multi-level marketing to get to the top of your pyramid because you're getting fed by it, Betty? Well, yeah. I said, well, why would somebody's legitimately at the top of their pyramid give all of that up going to come to this speculative new startup and give all that money up for CBN? So here's what I'm going to do, Pat. When I get back to the CBN Center, I'm going to run background checks on all these guys. Well, what are you going to do that for? I said, because I'm supposed to protect you physically and your reputation. I'm supposed to keep your you-know-what out of the meat grinding. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to run background checks on these people because they're in fiduciary capacities. They have permission to write checks on your company, and I'm going to find out the truth about it. So I'd send all the information in. About a week and a half later, I get this thick envelope in a FedEx package. I ripped it up, and it was like Christmas time for me. There
Wow.
were frauds, there were bankruptcies, there were, crimes, business crimes of other sorts. They were the biggest bunch of scammers and crooks I'd ever run up against, and I had such great pleasure to walk across the hall into Pat's office, and I talked to Barbara. I says, "The boss in?" She said, and he peeked his head out of his office. "What's up, brother?" And I said, "Hey, I got your superstars, feedback here, your background checks." And he came out, and he always put his glasses
Wow.
down over his nose. I handed him the papers, and he starts reading through it, and his jaw dropped.
Hmm.
And he came over and he grabbed me and pulled me close, and he says, "I want all of them off the property in the next 30 minutes." I said,
Good for him.
"Dr. Robertson, it'll be my pleasure." And I left,
Hmm.
and I walked down the hall. He had set them up in offices along what we called, Vice President Row, right outside his office. They all had individual office that we set them up with business machines. We set them up with, whatever they needed. They all had secretaries, and I had such a great joy to walk in there and tell them to get their scrawny arses off the property, and they would not be continuing, and it was very cleansing. But that's how what a lack of discernment he had. He was
Yeah.
constantly doing this with people. He'd put these people in charge that couldn't hit their butt with both hands if they fell on it, but they were in charge of
Hmm.
a company or an entity or whatever. He put a guy, and I like this guy, when he fired, the president of the multi-level marketing group. He was straining to find somebody to put in place. So he picks the guy that started in the mailroom, had no training, but Pat got a good read off of him. I'm not gonna give you his name 'cause he's still alive. But Pat, I got a phone call in the car. He said, "I just put so and so in charge of, Benefits Plus." I said, "Pat, that guy's an idiot." I said, "I know where he hangs out and drinks at night at the bars." I said, "You got no discernment." I said, "You put this guy in charge." And I told Pat, this is verbatim. People don't think I talked to Pat this way. I said, "You put him in charge of Benefits Plus, he's gonna jump up and bite you in the ass someday."
Hmm.
So he did. He put him in charge, and exactly what happened. He ended up getting in a lawsuit. Pat slandered the guy. In fact, Pat, it's a matter of record, actually made a phone call to Mark's, to use his first name, Mark, his sister took the phone call. She recorded it,
Hmm.
and Pat's on tape is threatening to kill Mark and his family because of the lawsuits he was filing against Pat.
Wow.
Interesting, huh?
Yeah.
Oh goodness. Yeah. David, I told you that this one was going to be a hard one for me because of growing up with Pat Robertson on the TV, and you're right, like the person that you see, and I know that God can use people, for the good, like we've already said, and I know that you have given plenty of examples on both sides, right?
Right.
To kind of put that. What I'm The next question is one that I usually ask about midway through the interview, just because it gives us somewhere to go. But in your case, I think it's kind of wrapping up into this.
Okay.
How would you define spiritual resilience?
Well, 2 answers come to mind. One is people that I've seen and met and talked to in general, tend to treat God as like a spiritual genie. They throw these prayers out and they expect him to answer them willy-nilly, and, "Gee, Lord, I could really use a new Mercedes Benz, give me a new Mercedes Benz, will you, Lord?" And the answer is no. So they get, discouraged at God. "Well, God must not love me. He didn't answer my prayer. I didn't win the lottery this month. I've been praying on my knees, praying for the lottery. Didn't get it." And so they throw a fit. "I'm gonna take my ball and go home. I'm gonna quit following this guy. I'm not following God. I'm gonna go and, follow somebody else." So that brings me to my answer is sometimes the answer from God is no, but it's always for
Mm.
your welfare. I quick example. Um, I was offered, a starting position with a thing down in Florida for Disney called the Disney Institute. They were gonna start a thing patterned after the Chautauqua Institute in New York. It was where rich people could come and learn how to do something, like do topiary gardens like Disney does. My my division was gonna be how you can produce a little animated cartoon, learn how animation's produced. There was cooking from five-star chefs. It looked good on paper, and they so much as offered me the job, and I was delighted. I could take my kids to Disney World every day, go to Epcot and eat dinner every night. I'm a Disney junkie. I thought I would die and gone to heaven. 2 weeks later, they called me and said, "Dave, we got bad news. We found a guy that's got a little more production experience than you, is in Ireland, and we're gonna offer him the job."
Wow.
Implosion. I was like, "God, what are you doing to me?" Fast forward a year later, Disney Institute was not doing well. It was sucking eggs. I ran into the guy, who got the job at an animation convention. He said, "Dave," he says, "you're so fortunate you didn't get this job." Their demand 80-hour work weeks are, the standard. He says, I'm under so much stress." The guy ended up having a stroke 2 years later and died.
Wow.
And the Disney Institute is one of the few entities that Disney couldn't make a go of. They threw money up on it, everything. So anyway, God saved me. I would have been that stroke guy. Okay, so that's
Mm.
example number one. The other thing I want people to take away and use their spiritual resistance is don't trust man. Don't trust the man that's sitting in the brick and mortar building. Trust God. Okay. I can't count the number of times I sat in churches and watched the pastor up there and pointing his bony finger at me and saying, pornography is evil. Don't check pornography, blah, blah, blah. Well, I did some research. At that time, 64% of all active pastors were actively involved in online pornography. It's a bit hypocritical, okay? But they're the person, they're the man, they're the spiritual guide through life. You're supposed to follow them. That's a bunch of crap. That's a bunch of crap. You don't need to go and sit 2.5 hours till your butt is numb, listening to some guy bloviate, lifting himself up. Well, here at the Church of the Mighty Sepulchre or whatever, the Holy Rollers, we have the answers. No, you don't. You're a flea. God can get rid of you in a heartbeat.
So then
Check
how do
God.
you build up? How do you build your spiritual resilience then if this is our definition of what that is?
I would say spend quiet time in prayer, listening for God's voice, because God doesn't scream. He didn't need to scream. Scripture says he answers in a still small voice. He whispers. Well, you're not going to hear him with lifestyles of the rich and famous or whatever on your TV blaring or Housewives of Beverly Hills or whatever. You know, Shut off the media, shut off social media, get in a quiet place where you're comfortable. Take your concerns to God. He'll answer you. Now you got to be prepared. The answer might be no.
Hmm.
He does what's good for you. He loves his children. If your child comes up to you, Nate, and says, "Daddy, I want to chew on this no pest strip. It's good color and it smells good." And son, you can't do that. You take it away from him. He gets upset with you. You took away what he wanted to have as a treat, but you saved his
Yeah,
life. Did he understand that? No. He's pissed off at you. You got to throw a tantrum.
absolutely.
And that's what we do. We throw a tantrum. God didn't love me. He didn't let me win the lottery. He did all this. He's- He did it for a purpose. Sometimes the answer is no, and sometimes the answer is wait. There have been times in my life when I ended up getting a job. It wasn't instantaneous, but I got a job that I wanted, and it was just the right time for me. And so those are my two answers. I don't know if they fit the bill for what you're expecting, but don't put your faith in man, put your faith in God. He will give you the resilience. He will
Yeah.
lift you up. He will carry you when you get weary. And don't don't ask man for your guidance. Go to God.
So David, it is absolutely the answer because it was your answer, which is very real and very raw and is really what we're looking for. G and I, we come from different not battling faith, but we come from different faith backgrounds, you might say. But we always love these conversations because we want to know how other people find spiritual resilience in what they do and what they've gone through. You've been through a lot. You've held a lot of positions that have been positions of trust with some people that a lot of people did trust. You saw a lot of good happen, even in the midst of the change that you got to witness and that you were parlay to be able to experience what so many of us never got to see. You've given us examples in 2 books. And I'd like to give you the opportunity, number 1, to kind of wrap this up, give us your final thoughts, what you have. And number 2, tell us the titles of the books and where they can be found so we can make sure to direct our viewers to that.
Well, they're in a dusty box right here by my chair. 3-day postage. No. Yeah, the books are not hatchet pieces. They just tell the truth. And that's it. I had no real agenda. So if you want a good read, you want something that the Robertson book, Protecting Pat Robertson, the high price bagman reference came from a time when Pat got mad at me because I drove by a place with his wife on the way to the airport to get her on the company plane. Pat drove himself. There was a Virginia Beach police officer writing speeding tickets. He nailed Pat. Pat got a ticket. He came back, got to the plane late, and goes, "Did you guys see that radar cop back there?" I said, "Yes, sir." And he just didn't say anything. He put out a memo the next day to Jim Small and me. He says, "I don't need a couple of high-priced bagmen carrying my laundry, my suitcases. I need somebody who's going to keep me safe." That guy could have been a terrorist in disguise and got me. But that's where the bagman reference came. I love Pat. I love him today. He's passed away now. I hope to meet him when I get to heaven. I'm going to bring Sweet and Low with me to flavor his tea because that was one of my job requirements. But it's not a hatchet piece. It's a transitional piece. The Ralph Reed book is shining a light on politics and Ralph Reed. He is one of the creepiest dudes I think I've ever met. First day I met him, I came out and I told my wife, I said, "I just met Ralph Reed." I said, "I spent 5 minutes with him. I want to make sure I had my wallet with me and I want to go get steam cleaned." And that's the impression I got from him. And it's proved true. Okay. So read the Ralph Reed book. It's got ironclad evidence in there. People wonder, how did you get the emails? How did you get the canceled checks? They're all a part of the Senate investigation. Okay. And I was there. I was there when the Christian Coalition was doing its thing. So both books are available on Amazon. You can Google or search for Protecting Pat Robertson. And you're going to see dozens of Pat Robertson books pop up.
Mhm.
He didn't even write a lot of his own books. He just had he'd give them outlines, and he had writers that would do it, and he'd proof it and correct it and stuff. He didn't have time to sit down and write a book every 6 months. Protecting Pat Robertson, Confessions of a High-Priced Bagman, and the other one is The Trial of the Devil Incarnate, Ralph Reed, God's Flim Flam Man. They're both available on Amazon. I would appreciate it because my wife needs a new pair of shoes, so buy a couple of books. And they can also get a flavor for some of the stuff on a website I've got called The Flim Flam Chronicles. I've posted probably a dozen audio narratives for each individual for each book. They're 8 minutes in length. There's no charge there. You can listen to them and get a flavor for what was going on. They cover a lot of the details. But yeah, go check it out. The Flim Flam Chronicles. My only apology is that my voice on the on the audio. So, you know, get your Rolaids. It's not a pleasant thing. But anyway, that's the spiel. And I want to thank you for having me. It's been wonderful. You gave me pretty much an open forum to spiel my truth, and I appreciate it greatly.
Well, David, I know that G and I are appreciative of you coming on. I'm going to get the books. I kind of wanted to get an autographed copy just simply because of what it is.
Well, I'll tell you what I'd like to do. I've got a few dusty copies laying around. I'll sign one. I'll even use my real name. Yeah, and just
Oh,
send me an email, mailing address for both of you if you're both interested, and I'll get them in the mail. I'll send them out to you. And they make fine coasters for hot drinks on your nightstand.
well, I
Nice.
do have a table that needs some leveling.
You
So,
got it. So they're thick. They're thick.
well, David, I'm excited and I'm grateful. We had a good conversation leading up to this conversation, just, letting you know my background with the 700 Club and whatnot. I'm grateful for you. We could have turned this probably into a 2-3 hour podcast. We don't like to do that. Just, make it quick and easy for our listeners. But truly thank you for the blessing that you've given us to sit down and have the conversation. G, you got any words?
No, I'm saying thank you as well. Yeah, I'm definitely going to check out those books, especially the the Flim Flam Chronicles and stuff like that. I just love the sound of that.
I appreciate that. It's innovative. Oh, yeah.
Oh,
It's innovative because it's done as a Senate hearing. So he's like
Oh,
under
cool.
oath, and I made a bunch of fictitious senators that can go far afield and talk about the Indian scandal that was based upon, and then go into all his other business ventures. So it's very revealing, and it moves along. It's a very fast read because all Ralph Reed, all I assigned to him was the Fifth Amendment. I take the Fifth. So you can just skip over the Ralph Reed parts and just go to the questions and all the evidence that's gathered about him and against him. And it's a jaw dropper. You're going to
and
think,
G,
why
this is
isn't
what
this
will
guy?
take us out.
All right.
He wrote it as a quick read about Mr. Reed. Take us out.